In January 2022, residents of the small town of Christendom in Louisiana were shocked by the horrific news. In one of the respectable houses of the prestigious area, the body of a young woman in an extremely emaciated state was found, lying on a collapsed, sodden sofa among dirt, excrement, and maggots. This story began cloudlessly happily, but ended truly tragically, and it all began in November 1985, when the long-awaited daughter Lacy was born to the family of Clay and Sheila Fletcher. The girl grew up as an ordinary, cheerful child, delighting her parents with each of her new victories and successes. At the age of 9, the whole family found a new home. They moved to a spacious house in the prestigious area of Christendom. The name of this place was translated ominously as murder, but at that time nothing foreshadowed the coming tragedy. The Fletcher family personified a typical prosperous American social unit. Clay worked for a nonprofit organization. Sheila ensured the smooth functioning of the court system as a secretary. Lacy attended a Baptist academy, distinguished herself by her diligence in studies and athletic achievements. She played for the school volleyball team. On Sundays, the whole family attended church. Neighbors described the Fletchers as pleasant and friendly people. Lacy gave the impression of a cheerful, sociable girl who loved active games outside and in the garden near the house. She made friends easily. Her classmates remembered her as a very close, kind person, although somewhat withdrawn and shy at times. However, at the age of 14, a sharp turn occurred in Lacy's life. The young girl began to show signs of Asperger's syndrome, a spectrum of autism disorders characterized by impaired social interaction with preserved intelligence. Perhaps this is why her parents decided to transfer their daughter to homeschooling, considering that this would be a more comfortable option for her. From that moment on, Lacy became increasingly withdrawn and uncommunicative. The girl gradually distanced herself from her former friends and classmates, spending more and more time locked up, avoiding leaving the house. Of course, such behavior is not uncommon for people with autism spectrum disorders, but loved ones could not help but notice the progressive deterioration. One of the neighbors, Robert, later recalled that around the age of 20, Lacy communicated with his younger brother for some time. But even then, her interests and preferences were strikingly different from those typical for girls her age. While her peers were into parties, fashion, and dating, Lacy spent time alone, preferring to watch Disney cartoons. After she stopped communicating with Robert's brother, nothing was heard from Lacy again. Neighbors believed that she probably went to study in another city or the whole family moved to a new place of residence. Alas, the truth turned out to be much darker. In May 2017, Robert accidentally met Lacy's father Clay and inquired about the fate of the once cheerful neighbor girl. When he asked how his daughter was doing, where she was now, what she was doing, Clay only briefly answered that she lived with her parents at home, and then abruptly changed the subject of the conversation. For Robert, this seemed very strange. After all, Lacy had already crossed the 30-year mark by that time, so she should have found a worthy use for her talents and skills. But no one had seen the girl in the Fletcher house for many years. The ominous solution came in January 2022 at about 2:30 in the morning. Sheila Fletcher, Lacy's mother, called the police, reporting that her daughter had stopped breathing. Upon arrival, law enforcement officers were met with a truly terrifying sight that traumatized their psyche for a long time. The Fletcher's home was permeated with a strong stench of decomposition and excrement. In the living room, on a dilapidated sofa, lay the almost naked body of a young woman with unusually emaciated features. Her entire skin was covered in brownish spots, scabs, and extensive festering bed sores that reached the bones. Even in her eyes and ears, traces of feces were found. Lacy's hair was matted into a huge dense lump, and insect larvae crawled all over her body, sucked into open wounds. A forensic scientist with more than 30 years of experience admitted that in his entire career he had never seen anything more shocking and creepy. The smell of decomposing flesh haunted him for a long time after the incident, causing nausea. Photos from the scene were so traumatic that authorities decided not to publish them in the media or on the internet. However, a photo of the sofa itself was still made public. It was the embodiment of a human nightmare: the bent and collapsed furniture, soaked in pus, blood, feces, and fragments of human skin. Even the wooden floor underneath it began to rot under the influence of biological fluids. The autopsy finally revealed all the horrors of this case. As it turned out, 36-year-old Lacy spent the last 12 years of her life without getting up from that very sofa. She weighed only 43 kilograms. Her body was in an extreme state of exhaustion. In the stomach of the deceased, experts found pieces of foam rubber from the furniture upholstery. Obviously, the girl was so exhausted by hunger that she tried to support herself by eating the stuffing of the sofa. The cause of Lacy's death was a whole complex of critical factors: an infection, bone inflammation, open untreated bed sores, as well as a general extremely exhausted state of the body. It became obvious that in the last years of her life, the unfortunate girl had been living in conditions of truly barbaric survival and complete disregard for basic human needs. The first interrogations of Lacy's parents, Clay and Sheila Fletcher, revealed little. They refused to comment on the circumstances of the case, limiting themselves to only general phrases about how their daughter suffered from mental disorders and rejected any help. However, later, under the pressure of evidence, they were forced to reveal the truth. According to Sheila, somewhere after age 20, Lacy began to suffer from deep depression and apathy. The girl gradually withdrew into herself, refusing any social contacts. There came a point when she simply stopped getting up from the couch, rejecting any offers of hospitalization or treatment. Sheila tried to take care of her daughter as best she could. She put food and drink next to the couch, treated the bed sores from time to time, and changed the bed linen. However, over time, the care became more and more superficial. Clay and Sheila admitted that in the last days before the tragedy, they did not even visit Lacy for 2 or 3 days, leaving her to her own devices. They did not bring food, did not change the dirty sheets, did not monitor her condition in any way. In fact, they simply resigned themselves to the situation and left their daughter to die in truly bestial conditions. When neighbors or remaining relatives inquired about Lacy's fate, her parents simply waved them off, assuring that the girl was fine. Meanwhile, the horrific smell of decomposition grew stronger in the house with each passing year. In the evenings, Clay and Sheila watched TV in the living room quite peacefully, calmly watching television programs and a full-length picture of Lacy dying in excrement and maggots. It seemed that they did not even notice the disgusting smell that accompanied them and the lifeless look of their daughter's glassy eyes. The most amazing thing was not even this idiotic inaction and ossification of souls, but the realization that Lacy remained sane until the very end. The girl, who was already 36 years old at the time of her death, was conscious, but for some reason she could not or did not want to leave her couch trap. What drove her? A painful mental state, stupor and paralysis of the will, or, perhaps, a perverted rebellion against the whole world? The answers were never received. Of course, the Fletchers' immediate circle expressed extreme outrage and indignation at their monstrous behavior. Some neighbors insisted that Sheila and Clay had perversely cruelly abused their own daughter, forcing her to suffer from hunger, rot alive on the couch, and inhale the miasma of decomposition. Others were inclined to believe that everything had happened not intentionally, but due to the pathological laziness, indifference, and mental ossification of the old Fletchers. The parents simply stopped perceiving Lacy as a person, their own flesh and blood, convincing themselves that she had voluntarily chosen this way of life. Be that as it may, in February 2023, as a result of the investigation, Clay and Sheila Fletcher were charged with second-degree murder for the death of their daughter, and not even by direct intent, but as a result of extreme negligence and cruelty. During the investigation, they unsuccessfully tried to justify themselves, referring to Lacy's supposedly conscious choice to spend the rest of her life locked up. But the court came to an unambiguous conclusion: what the parents did to their own child was not just negligence, but real torture and the extreme degree of inhumane treatment. Leaving a 36-year-old daughter to die in agony on a crumbling sofa, overgrown with pus and maggots. Watching her slow agony for years and not taking any action to save her, such criminal inaction simply had no justification. Even if we assumed that Lacy at a certain point voluntarily chose the fate of a recluse for herself, this in no way relieved the parents of the responsibility to take care of their daughter, at least providing her with basic hygiene and nutrition. Clay and Sheila were well aware of the girl's critical condition, but simply ignored it, preferring to live as if nothing had happened, only occasionally glancing at the dying child. After the couple's first arrest, they were released on $300,000 bail. However, public outrage and government pressure were so great that on June 19, 2022, they were rearrested on murder charges. This time, the grand jury fully supported the prosecution. "We will bring justice to Lacy," the prosecutor's statement read. "The public needs to know that caregivers will be held accountable for their neglect and abuse of their wards." The prosecutor's words were filled with hidden rage and a desire for the verdict to serve not only as a punishment for the Fletchers themselves, but also as a stern warning to other irresponsible parents. At the court hearings, the state prosecution reminded Clay and Sheila of all the details of their monstrous inhumanity towards their daughter. As it turned out, in recent years they had completely left Lacy to herself, not even daring to look into her room because of the stench of decomposing flesh and filth. The parents simply fenced themselves off from the problem, allowing their daughter to determine for herself when and under what conditions she would give up the ghost. Moreover, against the background of this indifference and refusal to give up parental duty, the life of Clay and Sheila proceeded, if not in luxury, then certainly in abundance. The father of the family continued to regularly go to work at a non-profit organization. Sheila ensured the smooth functioning of the judicial system as a secretary. In the evenings, the respectable spouses sat in their living room, calmly watching television programs a full meter from the dying Lacy, lying in excrement and maggots. It seemed that they did not even notice the foul odor that accompanied them and the lifeless look of their daughter's glassy eyes. 12 years of complete deprivation, isolation, unsanitary conditions, and gradual decomposition alive, even the most experienced lawyers could not help but recognize this as torture. As a result, on July 6, 2023, the court satisfied the prosecution's demands and sentenced 63-year-old Clay Fletcher to 25 years in prison, and his 61-year-old wife Sheila to 20 years in prison. The prosecutor in the case called the sentence cruel, but justified and noted its special importance for preventing such incidents in the future. And the community of the county sighed with relief, realizing that the worst parents in the history of the city finally got what they deserved. One can only hope that the tragedy of Lacey Fletcher will become a lesson for dozens and hundreds of other careless families who risk repeating her fate. This is where the chilling story of the 36-year-old recluse, who became a victim of the monstrous indifference and cruelty of her own parents, comes to an end.